Just a little teaser for the project. I'm about to show you how I made it. So I wanted to give you guys some context. I started this project with a piece of Wenge wood from a local hardwood shop, and I had them cut that in half. I brought it home, I jointed up the sides, and then I glued them together. I've been woodworking for about 3.5 years, and I've watched a bunch of YouTube videos on the how-tos. I dabbled in making some pretty low quality rocking chairs. I built a cabinet for the shop just for some extra storage. I've made a couple epoxy tables. So right now I'm in a phase where I'm making wood wall art. I find it just very fun and fascinating for me to make things that I think about and things that I haven't seen before. So I'm excited to show you this project. This is my basement workshop. I'm just about to start sanding the two pieces of Wenge I've glued together. They're not quite flat and my planer isn't wide enough for this piece, so I had to sand them. This process took roughly 3 or 4 hours to do. So now it's time to mark up the design with a white colored pencil, and I immediately messed up, so that's me erasing. I learned that I had to do some measuring to get the design right, which wasn't nearly as fun. A little silly face for you, never hurt nobody. And here you can see I'm using a fancy $1 Home Depot clamp to help make the markings consistent as I move it down the piece. So the original plan was to carve down the scribbled segments and to keep the non-scribbled segments elevated, but I didn't have enough thickness for that, so I ended up just carving all the segments. And here I'm marking how far down to cut. So for the biggest cuts, I use a 4.5-inch blue coarse cut saw disc. It's an absolutely fantastic tool. So I've carved a few pieces now, and what I've learned is that it's important to take breaks to sustain endurance and prevent frustration. So at this point in the project, I was experimenting with which tools would be the most useful. So you'll see here that I'm switching to a ball gouge, which is a product by Arbortech, and all it is a sharp piece of metal on a ball, and it spins really fast. And after a few passes, I realized that I needed to go back to the blue disc for bigger cuts. I'm using a level here to draw a line around the entire perimeter to guide myself how deep to cut each segment. And one for the camera. So for the last 2 rows, I had to switch back to the ball gouge. I had to be really careful here to not chip off the ends. So now that all the coarse cutting was done, I had to switch to carving the corners of each segment with a cut-saw rotary burr, and the motor here is just a standard Dremel tool. So now you'll see me switching to a sanding pad with 36 grit sandpaper. However, I didn't use this that much. So I quickly figured out that I had to ditch the sanding on my grinder and go right for my 40 grit sandpaper on my orbital sander because the grinder was taking off too much material and it was becoming kind of risky. So another unique tool that I have is a contour sander, and it's also made by Arbortech, and here I'm getting the small details sanded down with 40 grit sandpaper. So So what's really nice about this tool is that the end of it is soft and flexible, so I can just press down and sand away. So the absolute best thing about my shop is my chair, because I can just sit back and not do woodworking. I was pretty frustrated throughout this whole process, and this is me throwing a fit. So I'm changing up the music here because hand sanding was by far the hardest part about this project. So I got this sand plane off of Amazon with replaceable bottoms. As you can see, there's different contours you can choose. I use this sometimes, but mostly I just use my hands. So I have this desk lamp in my shop that I found very useful in finding shadows and inconsistencies on the project. I also bought this little rasp from Amazon that helped me clean up the corners and my ears. I had a piece of the project chip off, so what I did was use an old cutoff piece and glued it with 5-minute epoxy, came back to cut it off and sand it. So in between each grit of sandpaper, I did a technique called water popping, and what happens is the wood fibers come up after the water dries, and the next grit of sandpaper removes them. I found that with water popping, there was glue that would come through and present as like a little bit of a yellow color, so I ended up just sanding that off after the last grit. I sanded from 40 grit all the way down to 400 grit. So after sanding, I had to clean the piece with a vacuum and also alcohol and a clean rag before finishing. I thought it was a good idea to wipe down the piece with alcohol right before finishing. Something I learned from a fellow YouTube channel, 731 Woodworks, is to finish the bottom first so that if there are any markings, it will end up being on the back of it instead of the front. So that's what we're doing. I did a total of 3 coats of lacquer, and I wiped down the entire piece between the second and third layer just to make sure the fibers of the wood would be knocked down before the very last coat. These white flakes were from my non-clean Wagner spray gun beforehand, but my girlfriend was kind enough to let me use her sweet cheetah tweezers. I use these little cabinet bumpers from Rockler to protect the back of the project. To hang the yard, I got these heavy-duty D-rings and wire off of Amazon. After my very limited research, what I found out was the smartest thing to do was to put the D-rings about a third of the way down the back of the art so that when you hang it, it won't topple forward. Just making sure it's nice and sturdy. So we have found where we want to mark it. Now we just have to match where the lag screw will go on. It's about 1 centimeter below the top of the artwork.
Woohoo! Woohoo! I agree, I just think both of those might not be great.
I think that's a good spot.
No. Actually, that looks really good.
She's right. For the first time ever.
I'm zooming in on your face. What was that?
Ain't going nowhere. Look, see, it's strong. The moment of truth. Drum roll, please.
Woohoo!
Signing off for now. That's it. Okay, everybody, so we're almost there. There's one more thing to do. It was almost perfect, but I did make the wire a little bit too long, so you can definitely see the top. So I'll be shortening that, should bring it up a little bit, and then we'll be done. All right, the moment of truth number 2, because the first moment of truth wasn't the truth. It was a horrible lie. All right, now we're done. That was anticlimactic, but we're done. So, do you have anything to say?
I'm very proud of you.
Thanks.
It looks beautiful, and I love this new addition to our home.